students, staff, and guests, welcome to a really unique assembly. A chance to hear firsthand from two MLA candidates for our riding Wolds, DIDSBURY, and Three Hills. We'll be hearing positions from both of these candidates, and I'd appreciate it if you listen respectfully and hold your questions until the time period following the second candidate's, Mr. Rowe's speech. A few of the people in this room are already eligible voters, so we'll have the opportunity to exercise that right this week. One of the reasons we set aside time for this event today is that our society is built on the foundation of democracy. So we're promoting to you the concept of active citizenship, learning about the issues, understanding the positions of candidates and their parties, and then using your voice, your vote in the process. So I'd like to welcome our two candidates, Mr. Darcy Davis of the Progressive Conservative Association of Alberta, and Mr. Bruce Rowe of the Wildrose Alliance Party. And yes, please come back. Mr. Davis, our apologies for miscommunicating a start time. We're glad to have you here. I hope you don't feel rushed. The audience will be a whole lot more interested in what you have to say than what I've had to say. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to give you introductory statements for both candidates, and then I'll let them make their statements. And then following Mrs. Eamon, you're going to end up running the mic for the question and answer time, I think. Looking forward to that. Okay, so Darcy Davis is part of a 110-year farm family operation. Doesn't mean he's been there for the whole time, but he's past president of the Acme Agricultural Society. He's a local businessman. He's been a farmer and a landowner, and he feels he is an experienced advocate in regards to property rights and agriculture. He's a committed family man. He has 2 adult girls and a son. He also... Just 2 girls. Oh, I'm sorry, 2 adult girls. He is the son of aging parents, so that has a direct link to the challenges in our healthcare and rural education systems. He's a past chair of the Alberta Beef Producers, past president of the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance as well. And he is a relationship and consensus builder, so he enjoys working positively with elected officials and governing staff over the past 15 years. That has provided him with insight into what works and what doesn't. So welcome to Mr. Davis. Yes. And here's a brief bio statement for our other candidate, a lifelong advocate for common sense solutions and responsible government. Mayor Bruce Rowe wasn't always a politician. An electrical contractor by trade, Bruce operated his own small business for 35 years, through good times as well as lean years. He was first elected to the Bicycle Village Council in 2001, as well as the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association Board of Directors. A husband to Carol, father of 2 grown children, and a grandfather of 2, Bruce retired from the private sector in 2005, allowing him to focus on serving the people of Bicycle as mayor, as well as the AUMAs, that remember was the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, Vice President of Villages and Summer Villages. His statement, as your MLA, I pledge to put my experience to work for you and put Alberta back on the right track. So let's welcome first Mr. Davis for his comments.
Well, I apologize for being late. Things do get crossed up from time to time on a guy's calendar. And I thank the principal for that introduction. That's usually how I start out, is talking about where I've been, what I've done. It's interesting, I think I played basketball in this gym a long time ago, when the earth was young. Those are interesting times too. I guess for me, politics has been a bit of an involvement. I started out farming, and I knew there was a lot of government policies that affected me when I farmed, and how I worked and how things happened. We had things like the Canadian Wheat Board. We had rules and regulations about how we could raise cattle and where we could ship them. So I became involved in something called the Alberta Cattle Commission at the time. was in the late 90s. It later became the Alberta Beef Producers. And there I learned that government does affect us all, that it is part of our communities and part of our everyday lives. And I learned that policy can be very interesting. So I was government affairs chairman there, and then I went on to be vice chairman of Alberta Beef Producers. And in 2003, something happened. And we had a positive cow for BSE. And that really changed my life, not just as a farmer, but in how I dealt with government and how I had to live my life. My brother kind of took over my operation, and I became a full-time lobbyist and a full-time worker trying to get borders open and trying to get an industry to recover from a devastating border closure. And that was life-altering for me. And from there, I went on to some other jobs with the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, where I got to know a lot of people from across Canada, and I got to see what a great country Canada is and how it works. And after that, with the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance, I represented the 80% agriculture that is represented at the WTO. We were trying to get a good outcome at the WTO around getting better access to other markets. And that was a lot of hard work and very frustrating at the same time when you have 160 countries in the same organization. But the part that I learned there was I got to see around the world what a great country Canada is. I got to spend some time in Pakistan, Indonesia, Australia, and other countries like that, as well as in Geneva and Europe. So with that, I learned how much we have and that we can't take it for granted, that things can go wrong and that we can really have a lot of problems. So from that, I got to know some politicians, mostly a guy named Doug Horner, who's now Deputy Premier. And Doug encouraged me to go on and see if I could help serve the province in other ways. And that's really what it's about, is running to serve you as constituents and your parents and your families. So for me, it's about building our province, and that's why I'm a member of the Progressive Conservative Party. I really want to be a part of making things happen, of creating an environment that's great for industry so that you can all have jobs and that we can prosper, as well as making government work so we provide the services like healthcare and education. For me, healthcare is a really big deal. It's a big deal for all of you. You're all pretty young and healthy for the most part, I think. But for a lot of us, we're aging, and it's a big deal because we need a lot of care as we age. And our seniors right now are living longer. They're becoming more active into their older years, but even though they are in their last few months or years of education, of life, they do need long-term care, and they need full-time 24-hour care, and we need to provide that for them. So it's something that I'm really passionate about, that we provide that for our seniors. For education, we need new facilities. You guys have had the school rebuilt here, and I know it was a lot of work to get it done, but we do need to rebuild some others in the area, as well as we need some new schools in this constituency and in this province. And Premier Redford is committed to building 50 new ones and refurbishing 70 more. Strong communities as well is a big deal for me. I want to see rural Alberta as a great place to live. You guys have grown up in Three Hills and know how good it is, and I think we want to continue that. We don't want our towns to shrink and things to everyone to just move to the cities. I think there's a lot of potential in rural Alberta, and we need to realize that. And having our schools and our healthcare centers in those communities is a big part of that. But I think there's a lot of miscommunication out there about how we pay for all this stuff. And in this province, we're blessed with a lot of resources, which I think is a great deal. And it does provide us with a really low tax environment. If we paid the same taxes as the next lowest tax province in this country, we'd pay $11 billion more in taxes. So we already have a low tax environment in Alberta that can give us a good boost when it comes to our industries. But what we really need to is to work on our resources. In the oil sands, a lot of projects are coming out of capital cost recovery, and that means they're going to start paying full royalties. So that gives us the $40 to $45 billion to provide services. So we're not overpromising as a party and as a government. We are providing the services that we need to provide in a fiscally responsible way. So that's about it for me. I got some things about agriculture, of course, is very important to me. I really believe we have to keep markets open, develop new markets, and do the research and development that we need to do. I don't believe we need to cut back right now. There's other parties that want to cut back on things like infrastructure and roads and schools, and I really don't believe in that. I think we need to move the province ahead. So I guess we're doing questions after. both speak, right? Yeah, okay.
Bruce Rowe, up to talk to you guys next from the Wildrose Alliance.
Thank you and good morning. I just have one small correction to make. We're not known as the Wildrose Alliance Party any longer. That was changed a couple of years ago, actually. We're now just the Wildrose Party. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you this morning. I had the pleasure of speaking with the grade 6 class in Trochu on Monday morning. And I'll tell you, they are really an engaged bunch of students. They give us some real zinger questions to answer, and we get through it okay, but it was really heartening to see such an interest in politics and the democracy, the democratic system we work under in Canada. It's really encouraging to see young people get involved in this. This is probably one of the most hard-fought elections that Alberta has seen in 41 years, and this is so encouraging to see your attendance here this morning and take part in the process. So I thought I'd just start with a bit more background on myself than was given. I was born and raised in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. I see some green and white shirts here. Are those Saskatchewan Rough Rider jerseys by any chance? Any Rough Rider fans in the crowd? Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm still a Rider fan. Once a Rider fan, always a Rider fan. My parents farmed just west of the city. And I spent many an hour on the back of my dad's 1960 massive tractor with an 8-foot cultivator behind it, while my buddies and friends and pals were all in town having a good time on the weekends. But I did learn a love of the land that I have to this day. I very quickly became aware of the importance of the agricultural industry in local economies. After grade 12, I sat down with Mom and Dad and we talked about what my future would be. The farm was too small to support 2 families. And getting more land and borrowing money to do that would have put my father's investment in his property at risk. So I made the decision to attend the Saskatchewan Technical Institute and I started my career as an electrician. In 1969, I left Saskatchewan as a journeyman electrician, moved to Calgary to attain a full-time position. Things were not going well in Saskatchewan at the time, so I made the choice to relocate. That was probably the best, well not probably, I think it is one of the most important decisions I made in my life and one of the best decisions, because Alberta was very, very good to me. I spent 35 years as an electrical contractor. In 1971, I started my own company and ran it successfully for 35 years. Through that 35 years, I survived the good times and the bad times. And I know that many of you here were not born when the National Energy Program was put in by the Trudeau government, but that just about ruined me. My company had made $100,000 profit, and I paid myself $35,000 the year before the National Energy Program, and the year afterwards, my company made $17,000, and I didn't take any salary at all. So that was the impact that that National Energy Program had on all of Albertans. In retrospect, I know that the good times and the bad are what makes us all Albertans. During this period, I married my wife, Carol. We have 2 children, Barbara and Stephen, and 2 grandsons, Everett and Elliot. Unfortunately, our daughter, Barbara, was a nurse. She got cut in the Klein cutbacks and is now a nurse in Dallas, Texas, and met and married her husband there, so they made their home in Dallas. It's unfortunate we don't get to see our grandkids as much as we would like, but children move on and make lives of their own. In 1999, Carol and I moved to Bicycle as a step towards retirement, but I found myself busier than ever as I got involved in the community, ran for village council, was elected in 2001, and I assumed the mayor's seat in 2004. Also in 2001, as your principal has said, I was elected to the board of directors for the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association and served there for 10 years, 2 of those years as vice president. I was very amazed when I first went on that board, being a a relatively new politician and aware of politics. But as I sat around the board table with 15 other elected officials from around the province, and they were from all political stripes, the Liberals or MPPs or Conservatives, and it just amazed me how we could work together as a team and accomplish the things that we wanted to accomplish without partisan politics taking part in that decision-making process. And I think our provincial legislature could learn an awful lot from that. Those 10 years that I spent representing the people of Bicycle and on that board were some of the most humbling years of my life. But they were also the most frustrating, trying to deal with a provincial government that was unresponsive at best. A lot of talk, little action, little respect for locally elected officials. Being a lifelong conservative, I want to be very clear that I didn't leave the PC party. It left me. I don't know where they went, but it was not the party that I supported and respected for many, many years. The Wildrose would give healthcare decision-making power back to our local communities. We have a super board. I don't know how many sit on that board, but they have 74 vice presidents. Now, I don't know, can't imagine how that could ever be efficient. We will not ignore the waiting lists for medical procedures or waiting times at emergency rooms. They're just unacceptable. We will collaborate with the healthcare system. We'll ask the doctors and the nurses, the administrators, to come to the table and sit down and find solutions to our healthcare problems. And there are problems. We're the highest per capita cost healthcare in Canada, in Alberta here. With our resources, that's just not acceptable. We need to fix that system, and we will do that. We will stop the government's dangerous bill stripping rights from landowners. We will not consult phony consultations with landowners where a predetermined outcome is already been made. We'll promote local electricity generation using cleaner burning natural gas. We will not allow $16 billion of new transmission lines to be built that you and your children will be paying for. We will do a proper needs assessment by a totally independent party. We will remove politics from infrastructure funding for your schools, your roads, your overpasses, and so on. Right now, that's mostly done through the grant lottery system. Municipalities apply for grants, you may get it, you may not. And it's been clear in the past that that's been a political decision rather than a needs decision. We will take steps to keep our post-secondary graduates in Alberta. It was very surprising for me to find out that only 17% of high school graduates go on to post-secondary education. And these are very well-educated students that are coming out of grade 12. We match with anywhere in the world, actually. So why are these kids going on to post-education? And I suspect it's the cost of post-education driving a lot of them. So Wildrose had come out with a policy 8 or 9 months ago that we would extend student loans for those students who stay with and work within the province and contribute to the economy of Alberta, that we would forgive those student loans over a period of time. Hopefully that will encourage students to enter the medical field, whatever field they choose, engineering or whatever, and enable them to stay and afford to go to post-secondary educations. We will eliminate mandatory school fees for students. We will not allow the nanny state to infiltrate our classrooms. And we will stop the changes that are proposed for the Education Act, which will bring the Human Rights Act into the Education Act. We don't think that's the place for the Human Rights Act. In this election, the Wildrose are the only party standing up for principles of free enterprise, less government, increased personal freedom. These values are my values. They are Wildrose leader Danielle Smith's values, and they are Alberta values. In closing, I just want to bring your attention to this document that was sent out, and probably every resident in the province got one or will get one in the next day or two. These are the Wildrose pledges. These aren't promises, they're our pledge to you. And they cover 5 areas. The Balanced Budget and Savings Act. We will quit running deficit governments. We will grow your Heritage Trust Fund to $200 billion in the next 20 years. And it's doable. Economists have looked at this and we can do it. The current Heritage Trust Fund that Peter Lougheed started was left when he left with $15 billion. And today it's still at $15 billion. That's just not right. We can't skim off those interests from that fund. That's your money, your children's money. We'll make sure it stays there. The Alberta Energy Dividend, and we're getting mixed response to this. It's important that we realize that this energy dividend fund will only come with a surplus, and it will only come when the surplus is built up to a certain level, and that will be paid back to all Albertans that have lived in the province for 3 years or more. We'll install a patient wait time guarantee. So if you need any kind of an operation, hip, knee, heart, lung, whatever, if we can't do it in a given time, we will pay an equal amount of money to send you somewhere, within Canada, within another province, wherever, to get that done. It's important that you get that done in a timely fashion. Our Wildrose Family Pack will introduce a $2,000 tax deduction for each child under 18. As I said, we'll ban all mandatory school fees. We'll provide a $500 tax credit for children's sports and encourage healthy living. And most of all, the Accountability Act. And that's important, folks. Wildrose does not stand for voting yourself a 34% wage increase. That's not going to happen under a Wildrose government. Our salaries, our expenses will be posted online, and you'll know exactly what your MLA is making. And I think that's very, very important. I can also go to the legislature as your representative, and I can vote the way you want me to. I'm not obligated to vote the party way. I work for you. I should be making those decisions based on what you want me to do and what your parents want me to do. And I do install the right of recall. If I'm not doing the job for you, you have the ability to recall me, boot me out and fire me. I do this as a job application. I'm asking you for a job. You and your families are my bosses. So if I'm not doing the job, you have the right to boot me out and hire somebody that will. That's my opening comments, folks. I look forward to your questions. Thanks very much.
Well, I think the easiest way to do this is if you have a question for our representatives here, to just stick up your hand. Make sure you project your voice really loud so we can all hear, and then we'll give both of the candidates a chance to answer. Okay, we have one question right here to start. So,
Some parties are wanting to give money back to each Albertan, about $200 to $300. Wildrose or PC planning to do that?
Me, not a guarantee.
giving money back, $200 to $300 to citizens, and whether each of these parties, whether that's part of their process once they're elected in.
Okay, that was the reference that I made to the Alberta Energy Refund. It was when we build up a surplus, and it comes only from surplus money. That's only after healthcare, education, municipalities, and other programs are properly funded and looked after. That surplus, then 50% of the surplus will go right into the Heritage Trust Fund. That will happen annually. When the 20% of it builds up to $750 million, that $750 million will then be distributed out equally to all Albertans who have lived in Alberta for 3 years or more. But that's probably, we're predicting it wouldn't happen until probably 2014, 2015, somewhere in that range. The population of Alberta could easily be 5 million by then. So that $3 $300 figure is an approximate figure.
Yeah, that's not included in our budgeting or in our philosophy as a Progressive Conservative Party. Going forward, we're running a deficit this year of about $800 million, but that's covered by our Sustainability Fund, which is like a little savings program. It's not in the Heritage Trust Fund, but it's money that we've held over for the last 10 years, and that was for things, for a rainy day. And we had a rainy day in 2008, and that was called a global financial crisis. And when that happened, the price of a barrel of oil dropped to $40, and the price of gas dropped dramatically as well. So we were able to keep growing the province, keep investing in infrastructure through that time. So what I want to see happen is when we get to a surplus position, and our party plans to get to a surplus as well in the next 3 years as we get more revenue, is to invest that money back in Alberta. We can put it in the Heritage Trust Fund, and as well we can use that money for research. We can use it to build more schools and higher education, because you're all facing a knowledge-based economy, and we really need to invest in that. So for me, research is a big thing. We've got a lot of medical research we can do in this country, and a lot of other kinds of research. We can become a cutting-edge center for the world going forward.
Support the legalization of cannabis as a personal issue of freedom.
The short answer is no, I don't. I think that brings with it a whole wealth of new problems. If you're talking about cannabis for medical purposes, yeah, I'm open to have that discussion, absolutely. It seems to be that there's a lot of medical proof that cannabis can be used for pain relief and so on under license and regulated form. Free use of it, no, sorry, can't go there.
You know, at this time, I guess my position is similar to Bruce's in that I don't think we can legalize marijuana at this point. I do think we need to have medical marijuana available for people with MS and with chronic pain situations. But when I talked about research, I think that's another place we need to look. There's a lot of evidence that THC and marijuana isn't a problem for most people, but for some people it really is. And there are people who end up with I don't know what the proper term is, but brain damage isn't a great term, but that's the best I can come up with. So we would have to do a lot of research before we could do that, is my position on it. But I think by making medical marijuana available, then we could be able to do some of that research and see how that could work. I think we do have to continue working around the crime area of drugs and make sure that as drugs are available, that we're working on ways to educate young people and look after that issue amongst us. The ecstasy problems that we've had in Alberta are really upsetting to, I think, all Albertans. And I know that's not about marijuana, that's a chemical, it's a whole different thing. But I think it's something that we all need to be aware of is, why are we going down those roads and how can we stop it, frankly?
Mr. Rowe, if you take away school fees, how will you get new stuff in schools like textbooks?
I think the question was, if we take away mandatory school fees, how do you get textbooks? I think we should be providing that at school. I know it's been a long time since I went to school, but that's the way it was done back then. I think all we knocked back in pencils and a scribbler. It's hard to relate back that far, I know. But that's the way we used to do it, and I don't know why we ever got away from that and dumped that load back onto parents. So I would be all in favor of this block buying in thousands rather than people buying it at one at a time. I think we can do it much more efficiently.
You know, our party does want to do away with them as well, but we're not ready to just stand and say we can do away with them instantly, because that is a lot of unfunded money out there. And I think a way to think of school fees is as a user fee or something like that. And it's interesting to know that the Wildrose party wants to go to almost a voucher system for schools, where each student is worth so much money to the school and you have a choice of where you go. And that's been tried in the U.S., and it's really devastated the public school system there. And as well, the voucher system doesn't work for rural Alberta. that extra funding for rural schools. So I think we have to be careful how we fund our schools and how we go forward. I would like to see school fees reduced, but at this time, you know, we have to make the system work as best we can.
What makes you better than the other candidates?
We did all that.
Well, I won't for 1 minute say that I'm any better than Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis is an incredible person, there's no question about that at all. It's what I think what you as voters need to do is get past the personalities. You have to look at the policies of the parties and what the platforms are and what they stand for. The personalities, I suppose, have to enter into it to a degree, but I certainly have no issues with Mr. Davis at all. Assuming he doesn't.
No, I think when people run for politics, and especially in Canada, they have the best interests of Alberta or Canada in their mind when they run for politics. They just have different ideas about how they want to accomplish things. And I think that's what's healthy about politics in Canada. That's why we have a democracy, so we can each have a different approach to how we would accomplish things and what kind of Alberta that we have. So it doesn't need to be about personalities, but it can be about experience and what experiences those candidates bring to the position. So there are those kinds of things to take into account as well. We've kind of heard all that already.
You mentioned property rights, and you've recently noted that in the past it allowed seizure of land and resources of the land. What exactly is your opinion on those? And if you are against them, then what do you think should be done about the people who have already had land seized and may have received compensation, but basically received a violation of their rights?
You have to fill in a little better on who's had land seized.
Well, we've had our land seized, Brett got taken to court and received absolutely no compensation for it. Because COVID-19 was found on our land. We had farmland destroyed because of it.
Yeah, but they pay you a surface lease every year, right? Yes, so that's called compensation, okay? Okay, so how it works is, in this province in the late 1800s, 1890s, a lot of the gas and oil rights were taken by the province. And that's something that happened hasn't happened in some of the other provinces. Is when you hear about the government having a land sale, and you're wondering what land are they selling? They're not actually selling land, they're selling the gas and oil rights below the land. Those gas and oil rights belong to all Albertans, to everybody in this room, and to everybody in the province. And that started in the 1890s. And when they found gas and oil in the province, what has happened is the government back in those days then gave those gas and oil rights, they sold them to companies, and those companies, they take all the risk, they drill the oil wells, they exploit the oil and gas, they bring it to the surface, and then they sell it, and they pay all of us Albertans royalties. And that's those royalties I was talking about in the oil sands. So what happens is, that oil and gas down there belongs to all of us. So, in fact, it's a resource that belongs to Alberta so that it can be exploited for the betterment of all Albertans. That's how that works. So what happens is, we created the Surface Rights Board, we created the Surface Rights Act, so that when there's a land sale, oil and gas companies could go into areas and exploit that oil and gas for the betterment of all Albertans. Now, it's been that way for about 100 years, and it hasn't changed, and I don't think it needs to change. I've got oil and gas development on my land. I was consulted before it happened. They wanted to drill a coal bed methane well in front of my house. I said, no thanks. I would like it on the back of the quarter. They were more than happy to do that. They, as well, I was able to talk to them about how they were going to do it, when, and that happened. We then negotiated compensation for that activity on my land. They paid me the price of the land at its agricultural value, and they would have your parents as well. So whatever it's worth, if it's worth $2,500 an acre, they need 3.5 acres, they pay you as if you sell it. And then after it, as long as that activity's there, they pay you an annual rental until that activity is finished, whether it's 20 years later, you get that annual rental every year, and then the site is reclaimed, and we have rules about how it's reclaimed, and then it goes back to agricultural production. Now, I know that's a really long answer, but it's how it works. You have the ability to go to the Surface Rights Board if you don't feel that your compensation is proper, and you also have the ability to go to the courts if you don't feel that that compensation is proper. Now, you referred to the land bills. That's about ALSA, the Bill 36, which refers to land planning in Alberta and how we're going to go forward with planning land, and this is where Bruce and I disagree a lot. Bill 36 talks about how we're going to work on the land and designate land for agricultural, recreational, residential, or industrial. And in that first bill, there was some mistakes, and I admit that there was mistakes. I wasn't there, I wasn't an MLA at the time. But when those were discovered, they made something called Bill 10, which rectified a lot of those mistakes. So now we've got a debate going back and forth about property rights and who has property rights in the province. We know we have lawyers like Stan Church and Dan Smith and law professors at the U of C and the U of A who say the property rights now in Alberta are as strong as they are in any other province or industry in North America. So to say that we can just go and take your land, that isn't the case. When there's some activity on a landowner's land, he has access to consultation, compensation, and access to the courts. So all of those things are available to you. So it's a fact here, and it's a fact across North America, that when something's needed, like a highway or some of these other activities, there has to be a way to get it built. So we have to have an ability for expropriation, and there's always been an expropriation act, and some of the new bills affected that, and we had to change them as well. So I know that's a long answer, but it really needs, I think everybody, there's a real misunderstanding, and I've heard it a couple times in this campaign, about how property rights actually work in Alberta. And I think it's something that we all need to learn a little bit about, and there are facts out there. So I guess, you know, if you want to come back with more questions, I can answer them, and Bill will give you, or Bruce will give you his side too.
Thank you. My answer won't be long. Our intent and I'll make that pledge right now, is that we will repeal Bills 36, 24, and 19, as well as 50. Bill 36 is a land use framework. It's not as invasive as Bill 19, but I'll talk about that in a second. Bill 36 is the land use framework, and that was, what that basically does is take the decision-making away from your locally elected officials, your locally elected representatives, councillors and aldermen and so on, and it puts it in the hands of the provincial government. We think that's wrong. We think it's invasive on the MPs or counties. We also think that there are some good things in those bills. There's no question. But we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's repeal the bills, take a look at the whole structure, and sit down and work out a collaborative basis on how we can make this work environmentally sound with locally elected councils and officials. That's Bill 36. Bill 19 is probably the most invasive of them all. When that came out, what it does is it gives the provincial government the right to freeze your land for future use. And that future use can be 20 to 30 years out. If they decide that they may want to build an interchange there in 10 or 15 years, they can freeze that land at today's value. And that's what they'll give you when you need it 30 years out. You can't build on that land. You can't borrow money on it. It's frozen. That's absolutely wrong. So we will repeal that. That's our pledge to you. We're not saying that they can't be fixed. We're going to repeal them off the top right off the bat. We've had an Expropriations Act in Alberta for many, many years. We've built freeways, we've built interchanges, we've managed to do the infrastructure without these invasive land bills, so they're gone. We have an Expropriation Act that guarantees you the right to court access, it guarantees you the right to adequate compensation for your land. That's our stand.
Okay, this will probably be our last question. So we've got Terry here who's going to ask, and then
that before we go.
For the Progressive Conservative Party, what is your plan for medical care? Because we do not need like clinics or anything like that. We need family doctors, not like where is that money going in medical care?
Well, we've announced the family care clinics, and I know more doctors is one solution, and it's something we're working on. We've actually proposed that healthcare workers like doctors and nurses, if they're going to stay in Alberta for 10 years after they get their education, they can have a forgiveness on their tuition. So that way we can try and increase the number of doctors in the province as well as recruiting them across Canada and abroad. But the family care clinics are about providing whole care to the community. And a lot of Albertans don't have access to a family physician at this point. We know that. We can't fix that tomorrow. But what we can do is provide a clinic where you have a nurse practitioner, a registered nurse, and a number of other services so that if you don't actually need a doctor's care for something, the nurse practitioner or someone else can help you. That's the idea of this. It's not to replace doctors or primary care networks, but to augment them and help them to work better and to try and get people out of emergency rooms. Too many of us are going to emergency rooms for stuff that we would actually take generally to a clinic or something. We know we have clinics in towns like Three Hills and Olds, and the associate clinics work quite well, but at the same time, people know if they try to make an appointment, it's going to take them a couple of weeks, and they want to get something looked after in the next day or so. So the family care clinics are a way to try to work around that. The doctors, the AMA says they're not thrilled with that. That's kind of like the union of doctors. The College of Physicians and Surgeons actually say it's a good idea. Now the doctors are concerned because the doctor isn't the gatekeeper in a family care clinic, but actually people would be seeing some of these other healthcare workers. Now we want to make it work. We want to collaborate and work with the healthcare workers to make these things work. But we know what we have now isn't working. So we really need to come up with solutions, and this is one of the innovative solutions to move ahead.
One of the Wildrose's objectives, and what perhaps should be one of our pledges, it's a promise that we look at it, is that we will talk to the people in the system and find out from them how to fix the system. 20 cabinet ministers in Edmonton don't know how to fix the healthcare system. But the doctors, the nurses, the administrators, the people who work within the system should be free to speak up about how this system needs to be more efficient. We spend more money, as I said, than any other province in the country on healthcare, and we have some of the worst results. So obviously what we're doing isn't working. Let's try something else. Let's talk to the doctors, the people who know how to fix the system. And that model, I call it a collaborative repair. We can deal with the people that know how to fix the system. We can do that with education. We can do it with environment. We can do it on these land matters. If we just talk to the people who are in the system right now, how do you want it fixed, without all this doctor intimidation and all the other stuff that's been coming out of what's going on in our healthcare system. It's just, they don't talk, they don't listen. And I've had a teacher a long, long time tell me, you never learn anything when you're talking. You only learn when you're listening. That's my piece of advice. So, yeah, we just need to it's being funded, obviously, for the highest cost anywhere. The money's there, it's just not being used wisely.